Well, hello, and thank you so much for attending this session on Be Like Salt. My name is Ed Crow. I am the talent transformation expert for organizations looking to achieve eight-figure growth. And in the next 50 minutes or so, you're going to learn how being like salt is vital to your leadership journey. So what I'd like to do is start off by asking you, when you hear the word salt, what comes to mind? Go ahead and throw that in the chat box for me. What comes to mind when you hear the word salt? In the picture here, I've got an actual picture of a pile of salt, obviously. Is that what comes to mind for you? Is it table seasoning? We're headed into the winter months in the northern parts of the US. Perhaps you're thinking road salt. Maybe you're thinking of a flavor enhancer or perhaps a food preservative. Salt can be and is obviously all of those things. Did you know that the word salary comes from the Latin word for salt? In fact, in ancient times, oftentimes the Roman soldiers were paid in salt because of its value in those days. Did you know that the Mayan Empire was built, their wealth was built on salt? Salt is an incredibly valuable commodity. And that's why I believe as leaders, we need to be like salt. And today we're going to explore what that really means. How do we become a well-seasoned leader for our people? We're going to see that SALT is actually an acronym. We're going to explore the 4 things that I believe we are called to be as leaders. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how we work those in to our leadership style. So what I want you to think about is not only what SALT meaning came to mind for you just now, but think about the examples that I gave you, how throughout history, salt has been pivotal to civilization. I believe that carryover, by the end of our time together today, you're going to see how pivotal the salt concept can be for you as a leader too. And not only in your personal development, but in the lives of the people that you lead. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I asked you a few minutes ago, what is salt? And I like to think of it in terms of a flavor enhancer and a food preserver. Those are the most common ways we use it. Throw a little bit of salt on your food, it really brings out the flavor. If you watch any of the cooking shows on TV, a lot of times the chefs are throwing in a pinch of salt, pinch of pepper. They keep it simple, right? There's so much written about leadership, and much of it is quality information. But I believe in keeping things simple. And that's what SALT is all about. We're going to learn how we take the 4 components of SALT and work those into our daily leadership activities. And what's going to be more important is I want you to think about the ugly side of salt, right? If you overuse salt, the food starts to taste bad. If you introduce too much salt into your diet, hypertension can result. So salt can have its negative impacts as well. And so we're going to learn, how do we season our leadership just right for our people? How do we give them the real flavor of the vision that we have for them and the vision that we have for our operation and our organization? That's where the real magic is, folks. It's in getting the right amount of leadership in place, and the right amount of leadership delivered in the right way at the right time for our people to hear it, believe in it, and get fired up by it. I believe that's what SALT can do for you. So what does SALT stand for? You're probably saying, gosh, Ed, you've said there's 4 things. What does SALT stand for? Here we go. I believe the first thing that we are called to do is to be of service to our people. Now, this isn't a new concept. You've probably heard of the term servant leader previously. Some great books written on servant leadership, actually. But remember, I said, I believe that there are 4 components to good leadership. So we're going to distill everything down into just these 4 components. And the first, and I believe most important, is service. And so if you look at Booker T. Washington's quote that I've shared here on this slide, that if we want to lift ourselves up, we have to lift someone else up. And I want you to get in your mind, and maybe, if you're sitting at your desk and you're watching this right now, I want you to do a little exercise with me. So imagine there's someone in front of you, and you want to hold them down. What do? You would put your hands down, and you start pushing down on that person, right? And look what happens to your body when that happens. When you try to push something down, you actually make yourself smaller. You start to bend over, and you're pushing. You become smaller. But what happens when you pick other people up? You give them that helping hand. They're down on the ground. You reach down, and then you pull them up. You actually become more erect, more in person, if you will, by lifting that person up. That's what service means to me. How do we equip those around us that we lead to be better people, not only personally, but professionally? How do we help develop them to be the people they can be, the employees that they can be for us? That starts with giving them the tools, the equipment, the knowledge, and most importantly, the authority to make the right decisions. But they need our mentorship with all of that. And that all comes back around to service. I believe there's no higher calling as a leader. I get so disheartened when I talk with folks who believe that if they get that next stripe on their shoulder, they get the promotion or whatever, that life is going to get easier for them. Now, some of you are already probably chuckling because you know that's not true. There is no such thing as an easier job. Show me an easy job. I'll show you a job that's not going to exist very long. Show me a job that doesn't have problem solving as a key component. I'll show you a job you don't need. There will always be problems there. What service calls us to do is help our people solve those problems. Let me tell you a story. There's a little boy walking along the coastline, and the tide has gone out, and behind the tide, it has left on the beach probably thousands of starfish. Now, if you know anything about starfish, they don't move all that fast, right? And so they're slowly, ever so slowly, trying to get from the sand back to the water. Because they know that if they stay there on the beach as the sun beats down on them, they're going to shrivel and die. They need the water. And this little boy, knowing that too, is bending over and he's picking up starfish one by one. And he's throwing them back into the ocean. Now, meanwhile, coming the other direction on the coast is an older gentleman. And he sees this boy doing this, and he's curious. And as he gets closer, he says, "Hey there, son, what you doing?" And the boy says, "I'm making a difference." And the old man says, "Well, what do you mean you're making a difference?" And the boy says, "Well, these starfish are going to die if I don't get them back into the water." And at this, the old man chuckles and he says, "Son, look, there must be 1,000 starfish laying here. You can't possibly make a difference. Little boy just smiles. He bends over, picks up another starfish, throws it back in the water, and he looks at the old man and he says, I just made a difference for that one. And you see, that's what service is all about. Sometimes we have it in our heads as leaders that to be an effective leader, we in some way must have to impact the masses. And sure, some of us are called to that. Most of us, however, are simply called to impact those few who are closest to us. And that's a high calling as well. That little boy probably knew he didn't have time to save 1,000 starfish on the beach that day. But that wasn't going to deter him from making the difference in the lives of those that he could. To me, that's what servant leadership is all about. It's about lifting up those around us who are willing and able to listen to our message, to follow us along. That's what service to our people is all about. So what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to jot down, don't put this in the chat room, but I want you to think. I believe in some homework here. So I'd like you to think about what you could do back in your operation tomorrow that would allow you to be of service to your people. What tricks do you need to put in your bag of tricks that will help you to be a better servant leader? Maybe you jot down some ways that you've seen in the past where you missed the boat and you weren't of service to your people. That's okay too. I don't believe in beating yourself up for past mistakes. Let's look at it through the lens of learning and say, I blew it that time. I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to move forward. I don't expect that any of you, after being in this session for an hour or so today, are going to go out and be awesome leaders. To me, leadership is a journey. As a leadership coach and business consultant, I feel like I'm on the journey with my clients. We're all learning together. And so I want you to think about how you can be of service to your people. What traits do you need to exhibit to show that you're willing and able to be of service to your people? Jot those down for yourself. And I want you to come back to these notes tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Because that's how we start to change our behavior, is through reflection and then action. Now, if someone's comfortable with sharing something that they've done that shows they were of service to their people, please go ahead and throw that in the chat room and let's take a look at that. I gave you a few examples, but I think the one that stands out most for me is this idea of lifting someone else up. And that's why I chose this quote for this slide. I know I've been of service to my mentees and to my clients when I've been able to lift someone up. I recall a recent project I was working on where an HR director had been passed over for the VP of HR slot in her organization. And of course, she was devastated. I mean, she's been with the company for 20 years. She's had a steady stream of promotions and progress and responsibilities. And this was a blow to her. And the president of the organization called me and he said, Ed, would you come in and work with her? She still has potential. I don't want her to see that this is the end of her career or that she can't advance any further. And so we spent a lot of time working together on this concept of being of service to her people. See, this was her shortcoming. She was a solid tactician. She knew HR inside and out. People went to her for advice. The operations team respected her knowledge base. but her weakness was in her inability to develop her team. She would often step in and solve problems for them instead of working them through and teaching them how to solve the problem. And so, as you can imagine, this was causing her to be quite stressed out and quite frustrated. She was working more and more hours and not feeling like she was accomplishing anything. We worked for months with her on equipping her people. It's huge. And so that sticks with me, that when I'm working with someone, whether it's an associate of mine or in a client relationship, for me, the big thing with service is all about lifting that other person up, giving them the skills they need to be who they need to be. Let's move on to A. A is appreciation. Now, appreciation is a wonderful thing, as Voltaire says. It makes what is excellent in others belong to us as well. And I get so disheartened sometimes by managers who will tell me, well, Ed, I don't really say thank you, because they get paid. I mean, come on. I really got to walk around thanking people for doing a job well done? And my response is, yeah, you do. So how do you show appreciation to your people right now? What does that look like? Is it simply a pat on the back and an attaboy? Is it a thanks for a job well done? Or is it more meaningful than that? There's a great book called Hug Your People, written by a gentleman by the name of Jack Mitchell. And in it, and let me back up a little bit, he is the owner of a series of high-end clothing stores, business clothing stores from Manhattan up in through Connecticut. And of course, this book is not actually about physically hugging your people. That leads to other problems, okay? What it's all about is appreciation. And I recall when I read this book a few years ago that I set it down and I said, well, gee, there was no rocket science in here. And then I sat back and said, Ed, you're a simple guy. You love simple things. You don't love rocket science. This book is simple. This gentleman knows his people, truly knows his people. Not just walking through his stores and being able to say, hi, Sue. Hey, Joe, how you doing? He knows stuff about his people. He knows that Sue loves daisies because she's got pictures of daisies on her desk. He knows that Joe is the consummate soccer dad who spends every weekend running his daughter to soccer camps and practices and tournaments. It's those sorts of things. Now, you say, Ed, okay, great. So he knows those things. I know those things about my people too. What's the big deal? The big deal is how he uses that knowledge. Mr. Mitchell uses that knowledge to show his appreciation for his people. So on Sue's birthday, guess what shows up on her desk? A bouquet of daisies. It's her favorite flower. So why not give her her favorite flower on her birthday? And because he knows Joe is constantly driving his daughter around everywhere to soccer, Joe gets a gift card to get gas at the local minute market. See, appreciation it's the little things. We sometimes think that appreciation has to be the big to-dos, and there's nothing wrong with big to-dos. But I'm a believer that our people put more weight on the little things that we do for them day in and day out. And it's those little things that really drive the culture of a workplace. I was working with a small business owner last year, and we were trying to change the culture in his workplace up a little bit. And he was a boomer in terms of generation. He was in his early 60s, and he was going to be retiring soon. And we were working on his transition plan, his succession plans. We were developing some of his higher level managers. But he was in a very creative space, advertising, marketing, that sort of thing. And so he had a young workforce and a very creative workforce, obviously. Now, these creative folks, and hence because they were also many millennials and Gen Z, were asking for some different things in the workplace. So one of the things they asked for is, can we just be casual every day? And they didn't often host clients in their place of business. So he said, yeah, I guess, why not? What's the big deal? Although he continued to wear a dress shirt and slacks and nice shoes every day. So it created a bit of a division there. Like he allowed his people to do it, but as the leader, they're looking at him saying, well, he's not dressing down. Do I feel awkward putting jeans on? Kind of thing. And one day I was in working with him, and he was bemoaning the fact that people were asking him to put a Keurig in the break room. And I said, well, what's the problem with a Keurig in the break room? And he says, well, I already got coffee in there. I said, okay, right. So let me guess. You got standard black and you got standard black decaf, right? And maybe you got some creamers and some sugar. He's like, yeah, so they got coffee. I said, okay. So people want some variety. They want maybe some different flavors of coffee. Maybe they want some teas or some hot cocoa. I said, here's your homework. Find out what it would cost for you to put a Keurig in there and have it stocked and everything, and compare that cost to what you're already spending on your coffee budget. And he kind of looked at me. I said, no, I want you to do this homework. And so during our next meeting, we were talking about this. Okay, where's the homework? And I came back and he said, well, it would cost me about 10% more. I said, okay, so that's really not a lot of money. He goes, no, it's not a lot of money. I said, then get the Keurig in there, right? And he says, I just don't understand. I said, you don't have to understand. It's all about showing appreciation for your people and where they're at. They said this is something little in their workday that they could go and get some foo-foo style coffee instead of just some black with sugar in it or whatever. Why not do it for them? It's not a real additional expense for you. And then I started to see the light bulbs going off, that he viewed appreciation as something big, the company holiday party, or when they would have birthday celebrations. He thought that was appreciation. And they are, don't get me wrong, they are. But again, it's the little things every day that we do to show appreciation to our people that really make the difference. That's what drives the culture in our workplace. And I believe that's our highest calling as leaders, is to drive the culture of our workplace. Because our ability to drive the culture that we want is going to determine whether or not we ultimately serve our customers in the way we want and need to serve our customers. Now, the flip side of appreciation is this. You really do have to know your people. I recall back when I was still in-house, I actually started my career in operations. And I worked for an organization, well, it was UPS, and they used to recognize their drivers for years of safe driving. And one of my drivers, his anniversary was coming up. And so we would usually do a cake, and it was a big one. It was like 20 years or something like that. And we also had the catalog where they could pick gifts and everything. And he pulled me aside. He said, Ed, I know my 20-year safe driving is coming up. And I'm getting the catalog. I said, yeah, here's the catalog. Pick your 20-year gift. I said, I want to tell you, I don't want the cake. I don't want any of the hoo-ha. I don't want any of that. Now, what would have happened if I had said, no, it's our tradition around here. We're getting cake for your anniversary. It's not what he wanted. So in addition to knowing what our people want, we also need to find out what they're not comfortable with. Maybe some of your folks are not comfortable with public displays of appreciation or recognition. So get to know that about your people as well. Let's chat about L. Oftentimes people say, I know what's coming with L. It's leadership, right, Ed? No. It's listening. Listening is so critical for us as leaders. And I've often thought about Stephen Covey's quote here, because it is so true. How often do we listen, not because we're trying to understand the person, but we're listening because we're already thinking about what we want to say in return to them? when that happens, we're not really listening. Many times, this is all our people want from us, is to listen and be heard. They understand that we can't always take action or follow through on the things that they may be asking us to do. And that's okay. But they want to be heard. And it's critical that we let them know they are being heard. So let's have a little bit of fun here. Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario and I want you to type the answer into the chat box. So there's a gentleman who's a butcher. He's about 5'10". He, a little portly, wears a size XX shirt, has a 45-inch waist, and he's middle-aged. What does he weigh? Go ahead and throw that in the chat box. Throw your answer in the chat box there. What does that butcher weigh? And I'll give you a second. Now, this is about the point where I start getting folks saying, there's not enough information. Come on, this is one of these mind games. What are you doing? The answer that you needed was in the very beginning. There's a man who's a butcher. That's all you need to know to answer the question, because the answer to what does he weigh is he weighs meat. Everything else I gave you is a smokescreen. To see if you were listening to understand and digest. Now, I get it's a bit of a mind game. I get it. But it illustrates a point. And I actually love doing little mind games like that with myself because I think it hones the way we process information. It helps us. So how often are we jumping to conclusions? Were you thinking, wow, Ed's giving me like the size shirt he wears and he's describing this gentleman and his height and everything? Is he going to, and when the word weigh comes in, did you automatically make the jump? Some of you may have not, and that's cool if you didn't. But I use that little anecdote to get you to think about what it really means to listen to people. Listen with the true intent to understand. Listen and asking questions for clarification. And more importantly, listening between the lines to hear what your people are really asking of you. Are they really asking for help in solving the problem? Or are they merely talking it through while they're processing it in their own mind and trying to work through the solution they're working on, and they really just need you as a sounding board and maybe a bit of a guide? I know you've all heard the story that if you give a man a fish, he eats for the day, but if you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime. To me, that's the epitome of listening and then developing our people, right? Listening to what they need and tailoring our response to that need versus handing them the fish, which in this case could be the answer. Now, certainly there are times they may not know what to do, and I understand that. That's something that we have to go down that path with them, and that becomes a teaching moment. But I'm willing to bet the vast majority of you have employees who have been in the job for a number of years, are good employees, solid employees. They probably know what's really going on. And maybe they're just looking for a little bit of confirmation that they're on the right path. So give them the confirmation without forcing some type of response or answer or solution to them. People will always work harder at their solution than at yours. And if their solution is going to get to the same outcome, let them do it. As long as they're not violating the rules of the game, let them do it. They will learn so much more. And so I want you, when you think of listening, to think about and jot this down. How often do I truly listen to my people with intent to understand what they need? And then I want you to list out, how often do I listen to my people with intent to simply respond and put a fire out. It's the number one thing I hear in my work with supervisors and managers is, all I do is put fires out. I'm running around all day, Ed. I just put fires out. And so the quickest thing, go, go, go. The problem is sometimes they're not really putting the fire out. They're throwing a little bit of water on it. They're knocking it back. Then they're going to the next fire, throwing a little bit of water, and then they're back around again. And it just becomes this circle. Listening, I believe, is one of the things that we can do. And if we do it well, can help to put out fires in our workplace. Those figurative fires that we get paid to put out as leaders. We can start to put them out with the help of our people. Now let's talk about T. Trust. Trust is the foundation of every single human relationship, is it not? You trust someone or you don't. There's not usually an in-between. Well, I kind of, sort of, maybe trust them. Usually not. It's either, yeah, I trust the person or I don't. It's that fundamental. And I love Simon Sinek's quote here, that trust is built on telling the truth, not telling people what they want to hear. How simple is that? Again, you're getting a theme here that I'm a simple guy. I like simple things. I like simple answers. To me, if we've developed our people, we've given them the tools, equipment, the knowledge they need to be successful, it's time then to trust them to do their jobs. We can't be micromanagers. If you're a micromanager, you are probably stressed, you're running from fire to fire, nothing's getting done, and I'm willing to bet you're stuck in your career as well. Because you don't have time to work on yourself. And that's one of the beauties of learning to trust our people, to do their jobs. And yes, we need to be there to support them and letting them know that, but trusting them that we've given them what they need to do their job. Now, back when we had live conferences, I recall this was early in 2019. I was speaking down in New Orleans, and this was predominantly a group of human resources people. And we were talking about this concept of remote work, okay? And one of the ladies raises her hand, and she says, Ed, I don't support remote work. Wonder how she feels now. She says, I don't support remote work because I don't know if the people are working at home, if they're actually working. I said, okay. So what you're saying is you really don't trust your people. She goes, yeah, I guess you could put it that way. I said, okay. So you're in HR, right? She says, yeah, I'm in HR. And I said, did you hire those people? She goes, yes, I'm responsible for the hiring. I said, okay, so then you knowingly hired someone you can't trust. Yeah, that blank stare is exactly what she gave me. Because she realized that it was fully within her capability, her area of responsibility to determine whether that person could be trusted. And in her case, why would she have hired someone if she knew she couldn't trust them? Makes no sense, right? So how often do we do that? Maybe you have some hiring responsibilities as part of your leadership responsibility. Maybe you don't. But what you do have responsibility for is training and developing your people in a way that you know they can do the job, and therefore you can trust them to do the job. Now, oftentimes a manager will say to me, well, gosh, Ed, what will happen when they make a mistake? I'm held responsible for that. Okay, mistakes are going to happen. We all make them. You make them, I make them, everybody makes them. What's the big deal? The important thing is when one of your employees messes up, and it's going to happen, right? Can you remember to look for their good intentions? In other words, can you fight through maybe the anger and frustration you're feeling over the mistake that was made and have a talk with them about why they made the decisions they made that led to the mistake? Can it become a teaching moment for them? That's the most important piece in it. Now, granted, I'm hoping the mistake wasn't $1 million mistake, right? That would not really be a good. Although I have heard stories about people making $1 million mistakes, literally, and managers sitting them down and using it as an opportunity for growth and learning and saying, okay, you made a mistake, done. Let's not make that same mistake again. Maybe it's that simple from a trust perspective. Trust is critical. I believe that every interaction you have with your people does one of two things. It either builds trust or it erodes it. There's very few real neutral reactions between human beings. Think of it as a wall, okay? Every time that maybe you lose a little bit of trust in someone or you fail to give trust, it's like putting a brick on a wall between you and that person. And what happens once the wall is fully erected? You can't see them, you can't talk to them, you can't interact with them. That's the epitome of failed trust. And once you lose trust, and you folks know this, it's so hard to get it back. So let's work on winning the trust of our people. And we can do that by implementing some of the things that we've talked about today. And there are many others. We're on a limited time schedule here, but there are many things we can do to build trust. But I guarantee you, if you work at being of service to your people, of showing appreciation and listening to them, you are going to be amazed at the level of trust that you build in your people. So that's SALT, right? Those four things. Think about everything you've ever read, heard, listened to, whatever, about leadership. So much is written, so much good stuff out there. I believe these four things are the core. You get any one of these things wrong, I don't see how you can be a good leader. You work on these four things and you really knock them out of the park for your people, man, are you going to be effective. I guarantee you're going to hit business results. Your people are going to love you. They're going to work hard for you. You will be amazed at the differences you make in people's lives if you can exhibit these four leadership traits. And I'd be remiss in saying that these obviously can apply to our personal lives. Take them home and use them as leaders of your children if you have children, or maybe you volunteer at a not-for-profit or in your faith community, whatever it happens to be. These four tenets are so key to the foundation of relationships with other people that we can use them in all facets of our life. Now, I want to talk to you about two CEOs. Let's first talk about the bank CEO on the left of your screen here. Late in 2018, I got a call from a board president of a credit union. And he said, Ed, I'm told you're the guy that can help me. I said, I guess that depends on what kind of help you're looking for, but let's talk here. And he says, so our credit union is under investigation by banking regulators for some loan issues. I said, okay. And he said, because of that, we've terminated our CEO and we terminated our chief lending officer. I said, okay, that's pretty serious. I said, what's that doing to you? He says, well, Ed, right now we can't write any kind of loans based on real estate. No mortgages, no home equity loans, nothing like that. All we can do is offer some vehicle loans and some credit cards. Now, if you know anything about banks, they make their money off of lending money. So this is a crippling effect on this credit union. And he said, so what that's led to now, Ed, is we've got members leaving because we can't offer a full range of financial services to them. Okay. I said, well, how can I help you? And he said, well, we took our vice president of finance and we've made her the interim CEO. And she's solid with numbers and she's solid with technical. She's going to get us out of this entanglement with the regulators. She's the perfect person for that. The board believes she can be made CEO, but she really needs help with her leadership skills. That's where I'd like you to come in. So I met with Jen, and she was a little hesitant, obviously. She felt that in some ways, maybe the board was saying she couldn't do the job. So we had to build trust pretty quickly between one another. But as we worked together on these principles of SALT, I started to see an amazing thing happen. Her confidence grew. Keep in mind, she's a finance person, right? And that is the only position she's ever held in banking. Now she's responsible for everything in this credit union. And she knew that she needed some help on the leadership side. And so each month we dove into just one piece of SALT, and we drilled together and worked together, and she had the homework, the whole bit. And after the first 4 months of working on SALT, we started to expand to some other skill areas that she really needed to refine. Long story short, is at the end of our work together, I saw a confident woman who was ready to lead her organization. In fact, the board chair asked me to come to a board meeting, and they talked about the amazing transformation that they had seen in Jen. How we went from a workforce that in many cases were embarrassed to say the name of the credit union they were working for. Literally, like as I was getting to know the people, I'd say, so if I was at a party and you were at a party, what would you tell me about your workplace? I had people saying, I wouldn't even tell you I worked here. To people saying, what you've done with Jen is amazing. She's invigorated this work team again. And what was probably even more important is with her technical savvy, she was able to work through the regulatory issues that they had. They were able to start lending again. She hired in a great marketing person. They built their membership back up. And today they're looking, because of their growth, to build a new corporate office to handle the growth. It's just been an amazing journey for her, because the board recognized and she agreed that she needed in this new role to learn how to be a true leader. And the board rewarded her with offering her the CEO role and removing the interim title, which she obviously gladly accepted. Now, let's look at Dan here on the right. Around about the same time, Dan called me, and he's a second generation owner of a steel fabrication business. And he unfortunately was thrown into that role probably sooner than he was ready for it. His father had passed away unexpectedly. And so his father had not had a full time to groom him and to work with him. And he was recognizing that he wasn't the leader that he needed to be for his people. And so he and his general manager sat down with me and said, hey, we need your help. Dan needs your help. The team needs your help. How do we do this? And so we outlined a plan. And they liked the plan. And then they came back and Dan said, I don't think I'm going to move forward, Ed. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. He says, I just don't have the time to devote to it. I said, oh, well, tell me about that. He said, well, I'm the brains of this business, but I'm so bogged down in answering people's questions, and my management team won't make decisions. And so I'm everywhere all at once. I don't know how I possibly would find the time to work with you. And I said, well, how long can you continue down this path? The guy's in his early 40s, so he's got a long runway in terms of the time he's got to run this business before he starts thinking about his succession. But I said, how long can you physically and emotionally continue to run your business like this? He said, I've thought about that, Ed. I just don't know what to do. And so after several more conversations, I could not move him off of that. I just don't know what to do. What I believe was happening there was that he was so secure in being the linchpin, if you will, of the organization and people needing him, that he failed to see how that was actually hurting his business. It was hurting his creativity. He admitted that. But it's where he was comfortable. He didn't want to step out of his comfort zone. Well, just the other day, I got a call from the general manager. Ed, I think we need to talk. Dan's still frustrated. He's still not. We need you in here. Remains to be seen whether Dan is willing to make the commitment to change his behaviors for the betterment of his organization. I don't know. But look at how two different CEOs approached the opportunity of developing themselves for the betterment of their organizations. Our own self-development comes down to our own choices. When people say they don't have time, what they're really saying, if you make that excuse sometimes, and I'm guilty of it too, what we're really saying is whatever we're not making time for isn't important enough to make time for. That's really the decision that we're making. We have all the time in the world. We all have 24 hours a day. And we all, for the most part, have choices about how we're going to spend that time. So the real question is, if I'm putting out fires all day long, at what point do I let a fire burn so I can develop the skill set I need to put the fire out for good? Or do I give my people the time they need to develop themselves to put the fire out for good? That's where the real magic is. So, question is, which island do you want to be on, right? Take a look at the island on the left here. It's kind of lush and green, but it's also a volcano. It's going to explode. We got lava going into the sea, right? Maybe that's how you feel right now. That where you're at in your leadership journey is ready to blow up at any minute. You know, that it's out of control. Like there's some green around there, around the edges, right? But you're saying, gosh, I don't know what else to do. And I feel the rumbling under my feet. Well, here's what I'd say to you. Hop in a boat with me. Because if we just cross those quite pretty waters, just a little ways over, there's a pretty lush island waiting for us. That island where leaders are effective. And with effective leaders comes happy people, comes bottom line results, comes increased production, happy customers. I mean, I could go on and on. You guys know this. I know you do. So the question is, are you willing to make a difference in yourself? Are you willing to become a salty leader for your people? The salty leaders are hanging out over here on this plush island on the right. Their life is good. It's not problem-free. Remember, when the problem stops, so does the job. It's not problem-free. But there is a serenity and a beauty of being in control of your leadership journey and the journey of your people. So there's a very simple way for you to have an impact on your leadership journey. If you like what you've heard today, go to my website. It's right here on the screen, edcrow.com. And right there in the center of the screen, for anyone who's in the session today, free 30 minutes with me. Let's have a chat. Let's talk about your takeaways from today. No obligation. Let's talk about where you're at on your journey to being a salty leader. Because I guarantee you that if you become a salty leader, not only will you be salt of the earth to your people, but you're going to see an inner peace and confidence develop in you. I have the plan to make that happen for you. I appreciate so much your time today. Let's have a chat. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. We have about 10 minutes left together and was hoping that we could hop in and answer any questions live that you may have, or if you have something you want to run past me, maybe it's a challenge you're dealing with an employee, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. So you can throw them into the chat box and I'll answer them live. Winona says that was great. Thank you, Winona. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you found it helpful. Maybe one of the things that, yes, I do want to mention. So Kim has just placed in the chat box a link to a survey. Gives not only feedback to me as the presenter, which I value, but to ATSA as well, so that they can get some information on your likes and dislikes and make some changes too for future events. So please take a couple minutes to do that for both of us. Let me ask this, and you can throw the answers into the chat box. Tell me what one thing you're going to take away from this and get working on right away. Just one thing. Hopefully there was more, but throw one thing in there that you want to take back to your work group and try to implement to make yourself a better leader. So while those are coming in, Winona has a great question. She says, on the way to being a servant leader, what are some ways to deal with negative self-talk? Well, Winona, I'm going to assume that you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you mean maybe that you're not good enough to be the leader, or you're beating yourself up over things. I will tell you that that is normal. First off, we all struggle with that. Don't let anyone tell you that they don't. And one of the things that it's called imposter syndrome sometimes. When you got that little bird chirping on your shoulder saying you're not good enough, or you're not this, you're not that. Oftentimes that creeps up because you've been successful. I had a chance to have a chat with someone who was a TV show personality. She had her own talk show based on rock and roll music. And so she got to interview like the biggest names in rock and roll. And she said, you know what's amazing? These people get up and they entertain tens of thousands of people in concerts, and people are screaming their names. You'd think that would be a big enough ego stroke. And yet we would record a little 15, 20-minute interview. And guess what the first thing they'd say to me when the cameras went off? Did I do okay? So don't ever let yourself tell yourself you're not good enough. I know that sounds terribly self-helpish, but in our short period of time here, that's the best thing that I can give you, is don't listen to that voice inside your head, okay? You are what your people need when you ask them what they need and you deliver on it. Robert says one of the things he's going to take away is making other people leaders. Robert, that's awesome. The true mark of a leader is someone who can develop others. And honestly, your people can respond to you, or will respond to you. Let me put it that way. If you can demonstrate 3 things to them. I didn't talk about this in the video. I was saving it for our after chat here. But people will run through walls for you if they first know that you care about them. You care about them as people, just as more than just an employee and a cog in the system, right? Do you really care about them? They want to know that first and foremost. The second thing they want to know is, can you help me? In other words, can you help them to solve the problems they face on the work site every day? Can you do that through teaching and mentoring them? And then comes the T that we did talk about, which is trust. Can I trust you? Once you get those 3 things, you demonstrate that you care, you demonstrate you can help, you demonstrate that you can be trusted, look out for the relationships you're going to build with your people. Seth says he wants to know how to engage a supervisor or manager on how to be a servant leader. So Seth, can you specify, do you mean your supervisor or manager, or someone who is below you as a supervisor or manager? Because that's going to, if you can clarify that for me, that's going to define how I want to answer that question for you. Okay, he says just in general. Okay. So if we're talking about those who may be under us, one of the things that I'm a believer in is that people will mimic the behaviors that they see that are accepted in the workplace and that are working for others. And so if you begin to exhibit the signs of a servant leader, and people see that, whether they define it as that or not, doesn't matter, but they see that you're willing to be of service and that it's working, they will start to adopt those very same behaviors. And so it becomes a part of the culture of the workplace. Again, this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take months, maybe longer than that, years, perhaps, depending on how large your organization is. But absolutely, it can be done. Now, working up can be much more difficult. But I'm a big believer that just because, say, your supervisor is not being of service to you doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't be of service to your people. The buck has to stop somewhere, right? The crud flowing downhill has to stop somewhere. And so you can be the dam that stops that. And I certainly, like many of you, have worked for some really bad leaders, and I've also been blessed to work with some really good ones. And honestly, I've learned from both types of them. I've taken the bad ones and I've said, gosh, what are the behaviors that I perceive them to be such a bad leader? And I want to keep those out of my skill set. And then the good people, what can I learn from them? And so one piece of homework that I think you could do as well is think about the examples of good leadership that you've experienced in your career, and what can you learn from those folks as you look back? And then what about the folks that maybe were not good leaders for you? What can you learn from them to keep those tricks out of your bag that you don't want to emulate? We're down to just a couple minutes. I want to leave you with one parting shot. Self-development's a journey. We're all on it. Just because I'm talking on this topic, I don't think I'm the world's best leader. You know, I have my challenges on a regular basis with leading my team as well. But I'm quick to recognize when I'm not being a good leader, and I'm quick to apologize to my team that I've not given them the leadership that they needed. And they're appreciative of that. So I want you to walk away knowing that, you know, it's all about being human and being real with your people. Take some time. If this is a topic that's of interest to you, take some time every day. Maybe you listen to a podcast in the car or a YouTube video on lunch or something, but take some time every day and do some reading on leadership. I do it, honestly. I'm always working on a couple of different books, and every day I try to shut the door, turn the phone off, and just read a couple of pages, digest something new. You'll be amazed at the things that you start to pull in when you make that time for yourself. So I would really encourage you, as part of your homework, if you're really interested in self-development, build it into your calendar. Block off a little bit of time every day. If you can't do it during the workday, then, you know, again, do it on your commute or something like that. So Robert says, without salt, you cannot do evaluations. Not sure what you mean there. If you're not exhibiting salt, that you can't evaluate your people. I might agree with that a little bit, because you may not get the right feedback from them. Okay, he says yes. So yeah, I think that if you're not exhibiting those traits, you're not going to get the information you need. And the only way to get the information you need is to have a relationship with your people. And those building blocks that I've given you today, I firmly believe are the things that are going to take you to the next level. So I know we're right up against the hour. Kim's going to jump in and say, we all got to skedaddle here soon. So again, you have my contact information. Again, the website is just my name, edcrow.com. If there are other questions, anything I can do for you, please hop on there and shoot me an email. I'll be glad to chat with you offline to see how I might be able to help you in your journey. So thanks again to all of you for being so active in the chat. and for your questions afterwards. I hope you have a great rest of the conference.